sky above the capital burned red. Smoke rose from the golden towers of the Zalveth Empire, once the most powerful in the galaxy. Explosions shook the crystal domes, and the screams of the dying echoed through the royal courtyard. Inside the shattered palace, the alien Empress Lysara stood alone. Her gown, woven with starlight threads, was torn and covered in dust. Her silver crown lay broken beside her throne. Once millions bowed before her. Now not a single voice answered her cries. "Where are my guards?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Where is the fleet?" But no one came. Her generals had fled. Her ministers had betrayed her. Even the royal AI had gone silent. She walked across the throne room, her long claws scraping the marble floor. Every step echoed the fall of an empire. In the distance, plasma blasts grew louder. The rebels were inside the palace walls. Lysara reached the balcony and looked down at the burning city. "This world was mine," she murmured bitterly. "Now it burns because of me." Then, a voice behind her, deep, calm, human. "Your Majesty, we have to go." She turned sharply. Standing in the doorway was a man in black combat armor, his face half hidden by soot. His name was Elias Ward, a human soldier, one of the mercenaries once hired by her empire. She narrowed her eyes. "You a human? Where are my guards?" "Gone," he said simply. "They left you behind." Her eyes glowed faintly blue with fury. "How dare they?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, checking the corners with his rifle. His voice stayed calm, controlled like a man used to war. "We have 10 minutes before the rebels storm this floor. If you stay, they'll execute you." Lysara straightened her back. "Let them come. I will not crawl before traitors." Elias looked at her, really looked, and something softened in his eyes. She wasn't the cold ruler he had imagined. She was shaking, not from fear, but from pride and exhaustion. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "pride won't save you." Before she could argue, another explosion rocked the room. The ceiling cracked. A burning shard of crystal crashed between them. Smoke filled the air. Elias grabbed her arm. "Move!" She tried to pull away. "Unhand me, human. Move or die!" he barked, dragging her through the side corridor. The palace trembled as they ran. They passed bodies of guards, servants, even alien nobles who had turned on each other in panic. The Empress gasped when she saw her own banners burned and trampled underfoot. "Everything I built," she whispered. "Gone." Elias didn't answer. He just pushed forward, guiding her through secret tunnels that few knew about. His movements were precise, disciplined, a soldier who had done this before. Finally, they reached a small hangar hidden beneath the east wing. Only one transport ship remained, half damaged, its left engine sparking. Lysara stared at it. "That thing won't fly." "It will if I say it will," Elias muttered, opening the cockpit door. She hesitated. "Why are you helping me, human? My empire enslaved your kind." He paused, looking at her for a long second. "Because everyone else ran." For a moment, silence filled the hangar, broken only by the hum of fire outside. The Empress didn't understand him, but something inside her stirred. He climbed into the pilot seat and powered up the ship. "Sit down and hold on." Outside, rebel ships were already circling. Plasma fire streaked the night sky. As the engines roared to life, the hangar doors began to open, and blaster bolts rained down. Elias shouted, "Now or never!" The Empress grabbed the edge of the seat, her wings wrapping around her like a shield as they blasted off through the smoke. Behind them, the royal palace collapsed in a wave of fire. The last symbol of her power turned to ashes. She looked back, eyes filled with tears she didn't understand. The human beside her didn't look back at all. He was focused, steady, his hands gripping the controls like steel. For the first time in her life, the Empress wasn't commanding anyone. She was being saved. The transport ship limped through the night sky, flames trailing behind it like dying stars. Inside, the Empress Lysara sat in silence. Her once elegant robes were torn, her silver hair tangled with ash. Across from her, Elias Ward worked at the ship's console, trying to stabilize the engines. Sparks flew. Every sound echoed in the empty metal cabin. When the ship finally broke through the storm clouds, it began to lose power. "We're going down," Elias said flatly, pulling hard on the controls. Lysara's wings unfolded instinctively, shielding herself. "You dare crash the royal vessel?" she hissed. He almost laughed, but didn't. "It's crash or burn, Your Majesty. Pick one." The ship hit the ground with a violent jolt. Metal screeched, dust exploded through the cracks, and everything went black for a moment. When Lysara opened her eyes, she was alive, bruised, shaken, but alive. Outside, the twin moons of her ruined world shone cold light over a mountain valley. Elias climbed out of the wreckage, checking the sky. They'll be tracking heat signatures. We move now, Lysara glared at him. You command me? He looked at her calmly. You want to live or not? For a long second, she said nothing. Then, wordlessly, she followed. They walked through the forest until dawn. Smoke from the palace was still visible far away, a thin black thread against the stars. Finally, Elias found a cave hidden beneath a rocky cliff. This will do, he muttered. He started a small fire using pieces of wreckage and broken circuitry. The flames danced weakly, throwing orange light on the stone walls. Lysara sat across from him, her eyes reflecting the glow like polished gems. She studied him, this strange, quiet human who had no fear of her power, her rank, or her kind. Why? She finally asked. Why did you save me? Elias didn't look up. Didn't think about it. That's not an answer. He poked the fire with a metal rod. Didn't need one. Her voice grew colder. You are human. Your species was crushed by my empire. I ordered the destruction of your colonies myself. You should hate me. He finally looked at her. I did. The cave went silent. The fire cracked softly between them. You did? She whispered. I lost my unit. Friends. Brothers. The Empress gave the order to burn the human front. His tone stayed calm, but his eyes carried ghosts. I swore I'd never serve you again. Then why? Because when I saw you standing there, alone, surrounded by fire, I saw a soldier who'd lost everything. He threw another stick into the fire, and I know what that feels like. Lysara's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not a guard. Not a general. Not even her family. She turned away, pretending not to care. But something deep inside her began to crack like ice under heat. You humans, she said quietly. You act without reason. You save your enemies. You die for strangers. That's what keeps us human. For a while, neither spoke. The wind outside howled softly. Then Elias handed her a ration pack. Eat, she frowned. You expect me to eat soldier food? Unless you'd rather starve, Your Majesty. She glared, then reluctantly took it. The food was dry, tasteless, but it warmed her body. Elias smiled faintly when he saw her struggling with the packaging. Not used to opening your own meals? She shot him a deadly look. One more word and I'll have you executed, he chuckled. You'll have to rebuild your empire first. For the first time, she almost smiled. Just barely. But she quickly hid it. Hours passed. The fire dimmed. Outside, night creatures cried through the cold air. Elias cleaned his rifle, always alert. Lysara watched him from the shadows, her thoughts restless. No one had ever risked everything for her. No one had stayed when she had nothing left. As she lay down against the cold stone, her last thought before sleep was strange, almost fearful. Why does this human make me feel safe? Morning came cold and gray. Mist drifted through the valley like ghostly breath. The small fire in the cave had died, leaving only smoke and the faint crackle of cooling ashes. Elias was already awake, standing near the entrance, scanning the horizon through a cracked visor. His posture was rigid, military, but his eyes were heavy with sleeplessness. Behind him, Empress Lysara stirred, her wings shifting against the stone floor. She had dreamed of fire again, her palace burning, her people screaming her name not in worship but in hatred. When she opened her eyes, she found the human sharpening a blade with slow, steady movements. How long have you been up? She asked. Since the noise stopped, he replied. What noise? The drones. They were scouting at dawn. They didn't find us, yet. She sat up, brushing dust from her gown. So the rebels still hunt me. Not just the rebels, Elias said. Your own generals, too. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean? He tossed a small hollow device toward her. It flickered to life, showing a broken transmission. A council meeting deep within the empire. The screen glitched, voices overlapping. Lysara's rule is over, said a familiar voice, sharp and cold. Once the rebels breach the palace, leave her there. We will claim the throne in her name. The Empress froze. That voice. It was High Consul Theron, her most trusted advisor. No, she whispered. Theron would never. Elias looked at her quietly. He already did. The hologram shifted again. A different scene now. Soldiers kneeling before Theron's symbol, swearing loyalty. Capture the Empress alive if possible, Theron's voice continued. But if she resists, burn everything. The device went dark. The silence that followed was heavy, like the air before a storm. Lysara stared at the stone floor. Her claws trembled. He had betrayed me? Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written across his face. Her wings twitched restlessly, and when she finally spoke, her voice cracked, raw and small. I raised him from the lower ranks. I gave him power. He called me Mother of Nations, and he used you to crown himself, Elias said. You built an empire that taught betrayal better than loyalty. Her gaze snapped toward him, sharp as a blade. Watch your tone, human. He met her glare without fear. Or what? You'll order my execution? You don't have that power anymore. For a moment, the air between them burned hotter than any flame. Then Lysara turned away, her shoulders sinking. You speak as if I deserve this, she said softly. Elias sighed, sitting across from her. Deserve's got nothing to do with it. War eats everyone, ruler, soldier, doesn't matter. The difference is some people still stand when it's over. She looked at him, really looked. His armor was scratched, his hands rough, his face lined with scars. He wasn't like her kind. He wasn't built for thrones or glory, yet he stood tall when all her armies fell. A thought came to her uninvited. Maybe power was never strength. She swallowed hard and whispered, You lost your family in my war, didn't you? Elias's hand froze on his weapon. He didn't speak. I saw it, she continued. In your eyes last night. The pain, he exhaled slowly. A wife, a son. Civilians caught in your orbital strike. You called it a necessary purge. Her breath caught. She remembered the order, just one among thousands. I didn't know. No, he said quietly. You didn't care. Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the words died. There was no defense. Only silence. For a long while they said nothing. Outside, the wind howled through the cliffs. Finally, Elias stood. You're not my enemy anymore, but don't expect me to forget. He walked toward the cave entrance, rifle slung over his shoulder. Lysara remained still, tears glinting in the dim light. For the first time in her long reign, she felt something she had never known. Guilt. She looked at the faint image of her broken crown, lying near the fire pit. Once it was her symbol of power. Now it was only metal, she whispered into the empty air. If I could undo it all, would it matter? Elias didn't turn back. Depends on what you do next. The night returned heavy and full of whispers. The mountain winds carried strange echoes through the valley, metal clanks, engines purring far away, and the faint hiss of approaching danger. Inside the cave, Elias Ward sat cleaning his rifle. Every motion was quiet, practiced. The Empress Lysara sat nearby, watching the flames. Her thoughts were restless, circling the same truth she could not escape. Her empire had turned on her. But Elias's words haunted her more. Depends on what you do next. Suddenly, his head lifted. His expression hardened. They're here, she frowned. Who? He didn't answer. He moved fast, snuffing the fire, pulling her back into the shadows. The air went cold as the cave plunged into darkness. Outside, lights flickered across the cliffs. Search drones, scanning with red beams. The sound of boots followed. Voices, alien, mechanical, ruthless. Theron wants her alive, one shouted. Kill the human if he resists. Lysara's blood froze. They found us. Elias raised a hand, signaling silence. His movements were precise, almost too calm for the danger around them. He crouched behind a rock, rifle ready. When the first mercenary entered the cave mouth, Elias fired once. The plasma bolt struck true. The alien fell without a sound. Lysara gasped. You killed... Quiet, Elias whispered. There's more. 2 more shadows crept inside. Their armor shimmered, refracting light like scales. Theron's elite. They fired blindly into the dark. Blue plasma bolts scorched the walls. Elias rolled aside, took aim, and fired again. One shot, then another. The second soldier dropped. The third shouted into his comm, He's human. The soldier from the front lines. Then the cave erupted in chaos. Elias grabbed Lysara's arm. Run to the back tunnel. She resisted. No. You'll die here! He gave a bitter smile. I've died before. Before she could argue, he shoved her toward the tunnel and turned to face the attackers. The Empress stumbled through the narrow passage, the walls shaking with every explosion. Dust fell around her wings. She stopped, trembling, then turned back. She couldn't leave him. Elias was outnumbered. 4 mercenaries stormed in, their rifles blazing. He ducked behind a rock, firing in bursts. One hit the wall inches from his head. He gritted his teeth and hurled a grenade. The blast lit the cave like lightning. When the smoke cleared, 2 were down, but Elias was bleeding, a deep cut on his shoulder. He reloaded with one hand, breathing hard. You picked the wrong cave. A tall alien commander stepped forward, his armor marked with Theron's crest. You're protecting a monster, he hissed. Humans die cheap. Why not save yourself? Elias smirked, even as blood dripped down his arm. Because we don't abandon people. Even monsters, the commander roared and charged. They clashed in brutal silence, plasma blade against human steel. Sparks flew. Elias ducked, twisted, drove his knife under the alien's armor. The creature collapsed, snarling. When the last echo faded, only Elias stood. He leaned on his rifle, panting, surrounded by fallen bodies. Then he heard footsteps. Soft, uncertain. Lysara had returned. Her eyes widened at the sight of him. Wounded, bleeding, but unbroken. You stayed to fight for me, she said quietly. He looked at her with tired eyes. You'd have done the same. She shook her head slowly. No, I wouldn't have. Not before tonight. He gave a faint smile. Then maybe you're learning what it means to be human. Her wings folded close as she knelt beside him, tearing a piece of her gown to bandage his arm. You fight like a soldier, but you protect like something else. Like what? He asked, voice hoarse. She looked at him, her gaze soft for the first time. Like someone with a soul, outside. The wind carried the smell of burned plasma and iron. The stars shone dimly over the mountains. The Empress looked toward the horizon, where her empire once glittered, and whispered, Perhaps the galaxy doesn't need an Empress anymore. Only a protector. Elias didn't answer. He just watched her in the silence, the firelight flickering across her face. For the first time, they weren't ruler and soldier. They were survivors, bound by the same code. Never abandon the fallen. The sun rose weakly over the mountains, painting the sky in pale gold and gray. Smoke from distant cities still drifted through the horizon, curling like ghosts above broken towers. Elias Ward walked ahead, his wounded arm wrapped tightly with torn cloth. Every few steps he glanced back to make sure Empress Lysara was keeping up. Her wings, once proud and silver blue, now hung low, dulled by soot and exhaustion. They had been walking for hours, leaving the cave behind. The only sound was the crunch of ash beneath their boots. Lysara's gaze swept across the land she once ruled. The Empire's banners lay torn in the dirt, trampled by both rebels and loyalists. What was once a shining capital world had turned into a graveyard of her glory. Elias stopped near a ruined outpost. We'll rest here, he said quietly. The Empress frowned. This place reeks of death. He knelt near a broken crate searching for supplies. Then it's a good place to hide. No one looks for life in a grave. She watched him work, noticing how his hands moved. Steady, careful, never wasting motion. He wasn't just a soldier. He was someone who had learned how to survive when the world stopped caring. Why do you keep saving me? She asked finally. You could have left me after the fight. Elias looked up, eyes shadowed beneath his helmet. Because that's not what we do. We? She repeated. Humans, he said simply. We don't leave people behind. Even the ones who hurt us. His words struck something deep in her, a wound she didn't know she carried. Hours later, they reached the outskirts of an old colony. The streets were cracked and the wind whistled through hollow buildings. Murals of the Empress still clung to the walls, her golden image painted in triumph, her hands raised above kneeling humans. Now those same murals were slashed with red marks, eyes scratched out, faces smeared with ash. Lysara stopped in front of one. Her own eyes trembled. They hated me. Elias glanced at her. They feared you. That's worse. She turned toward him, her voice breaking. I thought fear meant control. I thought that's how peace was kept. He shook his head. Peace built on fear doesn't last. It only waits for fire. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she knelt beside a shattered datapad half buried in dust. Its screen flickered, replaying an old message, a mother's voice calling for her child during the last bombardment. Lysara froze, the sound cutting into her heart. Elias noticed her trembling hands. He stepped closer, resting one hand on her shoulder. Careful, not commanding. "You can't change what's burned," he said softly, "but you can stop more from burning." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting guilt and sorrow. "And if no one believes me?" "Then we'll make them see." They moved on, gathering what little food and water they could. As night fell again, they found shelter in the remains of a transport hub. The air smelled of metal and smoke. Lysara sat near a shattered window, watching the stars appear through the dust. "When I was a child," she said quietly, "I used to believe stars were gods watching over us." Elias sat beside her, arms resting on his knees. "What do you believe now?" She smiled faintly, her voice sad. "Now I think stars are reminders, that even when worlds die, light still finds a way through." He looked at her, surprised by the softness in her tone. "That's a very human thing to say." She turned toward him, her eyes glowing faintly blue in the dark. "Maybe your kind is changing me," he smirked. "Wouldn't be the first time humans changed." "A world," they both laughed, quietly, almost like strangers afraid to disturb the night. For the first time since her fall, the Empress didn't feel like a ruler. She felt human. Outside, the wind carried whispers of rebellion, but also of hope, and somewhere deep inside her heart, a voice spoke, not of conquest or vengeance, but of redemption. If one human could stand for her, maybe she could stand for them all. The next morning, the sound of engines shattered the fragile silence. Elias Ward was the first to hear it. The low hum of approaching ships, their thrusters echoing through the dead valley. He froze, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. Dust clouds rose in the distance, followed by flashes of metal under sunlight. "They found us," he said quietly. Empress Lysara stood beside the broken window, her wings tense. Her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from recognition. The ships were hers. The markings on their hulls glowed with the royal sigil of Zalveth, her people, her army. Elias crouched beside her, checking his weapon. "Your soldiers?" "They were," she whispered. "But now they serve Theron. Then they're not here to rescue you." Before she could respond, a loudspeaker's voice boomed across the ruins. "Empress Lysara of Zalveth, surrender yourself. By command of Lord Theron, your rule is over. Step forward or the human dies." Elias cursed under his breath. "They're bluffing." She shook her head slowly. "No, they mean it." He glanced at her, then out the window. Armored troops were spreading out across the colony's skeleton streets, scanners sweeping every corner. Above, drones circled like vultures. Lysara looked at Elias. "You should go. They want me, not you." He gave her a dry smile. "You really think I'd leave?" "I command you," she said sternly. He laughed, short and bitter. "You don't command anyone anymore." She stared at him, shocked, not by his defiance, but by the truth in it. For the first time, someone spoke to her as an equal, and meant it. They moved quickly, slipping through broken corridors as the troops closed in. The city's silence turned to thunder, boots stomping, drones scanning. Walls shaking with each blast. Lysara's wings brushed against the ceiling as she whispered, "They'll kill you for protecting me." Elias didn't look back. "Then they'll have to catch me first." But as they reached the lower levels, a massive explosion blocked their path. Dust and debris filled the air. From the smoke stepped a tall figure in black imperial armor, Commander Viel, one of Lysara's old generals. His glowing eyes locked onto her. "Your Majesty," he said mockingly, "the galaxy mourned your death. How disappointing to see you alive." "Viel," she breathed. "You swore loyalty to me," he smirked. "I swore loyalty to victory, and Theron promised more of it than you ever did." Elias raised his rifle, but Viel was faster. His plasma blade ignited with a hiss. "You shouldn't have come back, human." "Funny," Elias said calmly. "I was just thinking the same about you." The two charged. The clash lit up the ruins. Steel against plasma, human grit against alien speed. Elias moved like a storm, ducking and countering each strike. Sparks showered the walls. Viel was stronger, but Elias fought with desperation, every motion sharp and deliberate. Lysara watched in horror as the, man who once protected her empire now tried to destroy the only person left who still believed in her. When Vielle disarmed Elias, she screamed, "Stop!" Her voice carried through the ruin like thunder, commanding, royal, undeniable. The soldiers outside froze. Even Vielle hesitated. Lysara stepped forward, her wings unfolding to their full span. The firelight caught her eyes, burning with something fierce, something new. "I am not your empress anymore," she declared, "but I will not watch another human die for my sins." She lifted her hands, summoning energy she hadn't used since the fall. Pure light crackled through her veins. The air trembled. Vielle staggered back. "Impossible, you lost your power." "Not power," she said coldly. "Purpose." A pulse of blue light burst from her body, throwing Vielle across the rubble. The soldiers outside stumbled, blinded. Elias, half-conscious, stared up at her, at the glow that surrounded her like a living flame. You could have run." She knelt beside him, voice soft. "Not anymore. Not while someone still believes I can be more than what I was." When the light faded, the enemy troops were retreating. The city lay silent once more. Lysara helped Elias stand, her hand steady despite the trembling in her wings. "You fought for me," she said. "Now I fight for you," he nodded weakly. "Guess we're even," she smiled faintly. "No, human. Not yet." Because in the distance the rest of the Empire was coming, and this time she wouldn't run. Dawn broke over the ruins of the once great capital. Smoke curled lazily into the sky, and the pale sunlight revealed the scarred earth. Streets cracked, buildings shattered, the bones of an empire lying exposed. Elias Ward stood in the center of the plaza, rifle in hand, bleeding from his side. His armor was scorched, his movements slow but steady. Behind him, Empress Lysara watched, wings half-folded, energy crackling faintly around her hands. She had never felt fear, not like this. "Elias," she said softly, "you don't have to do this alone." He shook his head, grimacing through the pain. "I always fight alone, but you stayed with me. That's enough reason to stand together now." Lysara's eyes glimmered. For the first time, she didn't see a ruler or a human soldier. She saw a man who had chosen loyalty over hatred, courage over revenge. The horizon darkened as Theron's fleet appeared, descending in formation. Drones circled, soldiers poured into the plaza, plasma weapons glowing. The empire that had abandoned her now demanded her life, and the life of the only human who had saved her. Elias crouched behind a ruined fountain. "We hold them here," he muttered. "No matter what." Lysara stepped forward. Energy sparked from her hands, radiating outward like starlight. The air trembled. "I will protect him," she said. "No one will touch him." The first wave of soldiers charged. Elias fired rapidly, taking down drones and infantry with precise bursts. His body screamed with exhaustion, but his aim never faltered. Beside him, Lysara released a pulse of power that threw back the attackers, their screams echoing through the plaza. Dust and smoke swirled, lightning-like energy cutting paths through debris. Elias dodged a plasma bolt, rolling over a fallen statue. One of the elite soldiers targeted him, their blade glowing menacingly. He met them with his own steel, parrying, striking, moving faster than his body should allow. A sudden explosion knocked him to the ground. Pain radiated through his chest. Blood seeped through his armor. He glanced at Lysara, her energy shielding him, her wings flaring as if she were a living fortress. "You can't survive this alone," she shouted. "I don't have to." He gasped. "You fight for more than me now. You fight for the fallen, the world." Lysara's eyes softened. "Then I will fight, but you stay alive." Another wave of soldiers pressed forward. Elias, seeing no other choice, sprinted toward a group of drones, drawing fire toward himself to give Lysara a chance. Plasma bolts grazed him. Sparks flew. He landed in a heap near the edge of the plaza. Exhausted, the Empress's power surged like a storm. Light shot from her palms, knocking soldiers off their feet. The remaining drones faltered, their circuits fried by her energy. For a moment, silence fell. Elias pushed himself up, smiling weakly despite the pain. "Looks like we might make it," he said. Lysara shook her head. "Not without you." From the smoke, a massive warship descended, its cannons locking onto them. Lysara flung herself in front of Elias. Energy erupted around her like a protective bubble. The first blast struck and shaking the plaza, sending dust into the sky and throwing Elias to the ground. He coughed blood, struggling to rise. "Go," he shouted. "I'll cover you." But Lysara refused. She extended her hands, directing the remaining energy toward the warship. It exploded in a blinding flash, pieces raining down on the ground. The soldiers fled. Silence returned, broken only by Elias's ragged breathing. He smiled weakly at her. You really did it." Lysara knelt beside him. "No," she said softly, tears in her eyes. "We did it." Elias coughed, then whispered, "Take the galaxy. Make it right. For all of us." Lysara pressed her hands to his chest, trying to stop the bleeding, but she felt his life slipping away.
"No, don't leave me."
He looked at her one last time, his voice faint but steady.
"You are the light."
"Not me." And then, with a soft exhale, he went still. The Empress cradled him, her wings folding protectively around his body. Around her, the city lay silent, conquered by ash and smoke, but also by a new truth. She stood, holding his lifeless form, energy flowing through her, stronger than ever. The galaxy watched, for Lysara's signal of power, courage, and mercy had reached far beyond the ruins. And though the human soldier had fallen, his spirit remained alive in the heart of the alien Empress he saved. She raised her eyes to the horizon, voice strong and clear. "This galaxy will no longer be ruled by fear. It will be ruled by those who protect the fallen. For him, I will lead." The first rays of sunlight struck her wings. They gleamed silver blue, brighter than ever. And so the Empress of Zalveth stood alone, not as a ruler of power, but as a guardian of hope.